I'm Naya, mom, boob nerd, board-certified lactation consultant, and lover of lipstick and curse words. I'm that weird Indian girl you knew in high school, all grown up.
And I'm Alexis, mom, birth nerd, and therapist plus doula, encouraging parents to hold joy plus what the fuck is this mess simultaneously. Some people think I'm too much, but those aren't my people. And we are the Top Knot Squad. TKS is a tiny little podcast about motherhood in real life, the good, the bad, the ugly AF.
Hosted by two women that are passionate about our beliefs and unafraid to speak our minds.
Friends that wanted to create space for all that ish we are too scared to talk about.
Are you ready to laugh, be vulnerable, and keep it real with us?
Top knots are not required.
If the Top Knot Squad content makes you laugh, nod in agreement, or makes you feel less alone, we'd love your support in the cost of producing this podcast. Visit patreon.com/topknotsquad to learn more about our budget-friendly sponsorship tiers and how you can help ensure that TKS has a future. Every little bit helps.
On today's episode, we'll be discussing the whitewashing of motherhood. This topic is sure to bring up some discomfort, but that's what we do here. We talk about the things not always prioritized in conversations around parenting. So let's open our hearts and minds and take some time to listen, reflect, and grow. We are thrilled to have our friend and colleague, Courtney Butts, back on the squad to dive into this topic with us. Courtney joined us last season as we discussed maternal mortality, and we are looking forward to hearing her viewpoint on today's topic as well. Courtney is a licensed master social worker and certified best doula in Dallas, Texas. She has a BS in psychology and an MS in social work. She has over 10 years of experience educating and supporting individuals and families. After the birth of her son, Courtney knew she wanted to serve as a support to other families as a doula and childbirth educator. This work has allowed Courtney to bring together two things she is passionate about: working with trauma survivors and her love of all things pregnancy and postpartum. Her goal is to provide a safe and compassionate space for families to bring life into the world. Courtney also provides therapy with a focus on maternal mental health. So welcome, Courtney. We're glad to have you back.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming back on. We're glad to have you.
Yeah.
So just a disclaimer, I'm battling a cold. Hopefully I can make it through the episode without hacking up a lung. Why is that a phrase?
Hacking up a lung?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Sounds disgusting.
Well, that's what I just said. It's pretty, inside my body feels pretty gross right now.
Yeah.
So.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. All right. Well, let's just dive in. So one question that I put down was kind of knowing, especially in our field, we all three of us work in prenatal and postpartum. And so we're oftentimes recommending different books or blogs or articles for our clients to read. And what I've noticed is that many of those are authored by white people, not just women. Oftentimes they're authored by white men. A lot of the books that I recommend actually are authored by white men. Yet we know that other voices exist and they aren't being amplified in the same way. So why do we think that this is happening?
So I think that's a really good question, and definitely something that I've been thinking about, whitewashing and cultural appropriation and like why it's happening. I think is a big question. The first thing that popped in my head is white people being fragile and not wanting to accept and acknowledge other people and other cultures and acknowledge the fact that they've done some things differently and better, and that's fine. But just being able to say, like, yeah, we don't do all the things. There's other people that do things better, and accepting that rather than kind of staking claim to everything or discovering everything.
Yeah, discovering in quotes there for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think just to add on to what you said, I think you're absolutely right. A lot of it is refusing to acknowledge or even, just basically acknowledge. You don't even have to accept that somebody has been using some form of postpartum care for centuries. It's a quote unquote discovery, and it's something new. And I'm going to jump ahead a little bit here, but quote unquote trendy as well, whether it's midwifery care or having a doula at your birth or a rebozo wrap or whatever. But I agree with that.
I mean, what I hear is, and that's white supremacy. That's the point of white supremacy, is that white is better. So these white voices have something better to say, which of course is not true, but that's what's leading this problem.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think specifically about like thinking about the parenting books and blogs and, you know, all of that, I think for people of color, what we have to say hasn't always been valued. Mm-hmm. So I think it's kind of like, why put forth the effort and do all the things and invest the money if my thoughts and my opinions aren't going to be valued or they're not going to sell?
I think that's a really good point. And I do feel like a lot of times people of color are hesitant to share the way that they were brought up or childhood traditions that were passed down from generations because of either being not necessarily viewed as strange, but it's like, why put forth the effort and why try and why share yourself emotionally or financially or however to only be shut down again and again or to be told, no, that's not right or that's not how we do it or what have you.
Well, it also, I mean, all of this also makes me think about, I put down information about, I personally have been kind of battling with a local blog and their issue with inclusivity. So it also feels like opportunity isn't being given for a wide range of authors, for a wide range of voices. And that's what we're seeing. So locally, there's a blog here that they had posted their most up-to-date photo of their writers. And it just, if you look at the photo, it's very white. Like it looks like a bunch of white women. And whenever they're challenged on that platform defends themselves to the end of, no, we're completely diverse and we have all these different voices and we really value that. And if someone else doesn't think that their voice is represented, then they can just apply. And so I think part of the challenge that I've given is that, you know, it's not just about saying you can apply if you want. Mm-hmm. It's about being a space that is actually welcoming of all types of people, and that the space that they've created doesn't feel safe for someone to go and give their voice to. Mm-hmm. So I think that's also part of the problem, is that there are platforms that exist that aren't necessarily set up to be inclusive.
Yeah, and I think the safety piece of it is huge. You know, feeling comfortable, feeling valued, and feeling safe to apply or even in some situations interact with. Mm-hmm. Some groups and organizations, I think, deter some people in general, but specifically people of color, from engaging or implying or any of that.
Mm-hmm.
So to kind of play off of what Alexis said, what do you think, or how can we work to shift these norms? What is something that we as mothers or, you know, birth workers or even women who have a podcast and a social media channel, what is something that we can do to sort of shift those norms?
I think something that's really big for me is representation. So upon creating my website, as a Black woman, it was really important for me to create a space where other people of color can go onto my website and learn about the services that I provide while seeing other people that look like them. Mm-hmm. So I tell Alexis in a loving and joking way that she is the only white person on my website. So every, picture and every picture I have on my website is a person of color. And with the exception of some pictures of Alexis and I for the trainings that we do. But that was really important for me, for people to be able to see a reflection of themselves when reaching out to me. Same thing with my social media is, making sure that people are represented, equally represented. So they feel comfortable reaching out and asking questions and engaging with me knowing that I accept them and I care for them just like I would with any person.
Mm-hmm.
So I think being able to go the extra mile to include all people in your marketing materials, for people that are bloggers, being able to reach out to different types of people of color, people from different backgrounds, to engage them, I think is important to let other voices be heard, and to reach other cultures.
Yeah, and I think it's not even just a race issue too. Mm-hmm. And thinking about how parenthood, the culture of parenthood and what we see and what we read and what's represented is very cis heteronormative.
Very able-bodied.
And even when whoa, can you hear that, Courtney?
That's thunder.
Yeah.
That's thunder.
Oh.
Sorry, listeners. There's apparently a crazy storm outside. It was sun shining when I walked in.
I know. Same.
What was I saying? Oh, even when you think about like the image of a mother, like I think that a lot of times the image that's presented, it's not only is it a white woman, it's a heterosexual woman. She's skinny, she's blonde. There's a very certain look of how she comes across. She's got a Starbucks in her hand. So it's not just race that we're talking about.
It's kind of everything. Yeah, absolutely. And I think in order to sort of change that, and this is something that I really try to do, especially on my social media, is I don't know if our listeners know, I don't think I've ever come out and explicitly stated this, but I'm Indian. I'm South Asian, born, raised for 4 years before moving to the U.S. My husband is white. I'm raising biracial children. I guess multiracial because he's not just white. He's a lot of things. But but something that I try to do is share families that don't look like your stereotypical families that you see represented in the media, whether it's resharing a photo or sharing a post that maybe Courtney put out on her page or Alexis, you put out on your page that has families that don't look like my normal clients on there. But I think a really easy step that we can all take, regardless of what our occupation is to use our voice to kind of amplify others and to lift others up who may not have the follow count or the likes or whatever, especially in a social media sense, to amplify their voices too.
Mm-hmm. Also expanding your own feed. So, I know for me, I've made an effort to follow people that have a different voice, have a different story to tell, so that I can learn from them as well. And so my feed isn't just one look that's coming across my screen,
right.
So that I'm seeing a lot of different types of mothers and parents and stories, because that's the reality that we live in. And I don't want to see just this one image. That's not realistic. I did want to read this quote that I found when I was kind of researching for this episode. I found this one article from Bitch Media, and they interviewed 5 different mommy bloggers.
Oh, I've read this. It's a good one.
It was a really good article. I'll make sure to link it in the show notes. But they interviewed them to kind of hear their experience being in the mommy blogger world. And one quote really stuck out to me. She said, "Diversity in blogging and motherhood will only be accepted as it conforms to the pre-existing consumeristic middle-class standard. Those of us who don't fit the norms, whether racially, culturally, sexually, ability-wise, are accepted only in as much as we leave behind the otherness of those identities and pretend we're just like you." So I think that also really spoke to what you were saying, Courtney, about that safety piece of that, even if a platform is being diverse, they're still expecting a certain way of being from that identity is kind of what I took from that quote.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sure. I think it's definitely saying, yes, we want you, but you have to conform and be what we want. And then, what that makes me think of in that situation, and I know for me, growing up in Wisconsin, is then a lot of times that person is then expected to be the token and then kind of put on display. And it's like, this is what we have, and this is, you know, what we do, and we're inclusive.
Look at how diverse
but is
we
that
are.
Really true?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. And I've definitely seen that. So Alexis and I actually met years ago at a blogger get-together, I think. We were both blogging fairly frequently then. I've definitely fallen off the wagon, and I think she has too. And I think part of the reason that I have is because I felt like I couldn't have my authentic voice and still generate a large number of readers and followers and things, because it was not what they were looking for. It wasn't the chic outfits put together. And even on social media, I would notice that style posts, quote unquote, would garner more likes and comments and interactions than just a post of me and my kids or, you know, something else entirely. And so that's something I still struggle with. Every now and again, I get the urge to go back. Oh, I'm going to start writing. I have things to say. And I do. And I just don't know if a blogging platform is where I want to go, because I feel like I have to blog in a certain way or write about a certain thing, or I can't get too deep about talking about mental health or struggles of moving on to this new phase of mommyhood where I'm not having kids anymore, and things like that. And so that makes me a little sad. And so I kind of keep these thoughts to myself and then share them with close friends, of course. And of course, the reaction I usually get is, oh my gosh, you should write about that. I think so many people would identify it. But then because that safety piece is now missing for me, I'm not sure that it would be well received, or would I be ridiculed for being open and honest with my particular experience.
Yeah, I had a similar experience with writing. Most of what I wrote was through a social justice lens. And it was really, well, one, I was censored. So that platform that I mentioned previously, I used to write for them, and they censored my work because it was too political. But even too, like even my friends and family and my own personal following, I would see the numbers, like when I would look at the blog, like people were clicking on it and looking at it. It was getting viewed, but it wasn't getting shared. And so that was really disheartening, because I would, you know, I'd put a lot of passion into what I wrote, and it felt like it wasn't getting the same response as this image of parenthood that you're supposed to talk about.
Right.
So yeah, I feel that.
Yeah, I think we're both a little disgruntled when it comes to that. And we both know mommy bloggers who are doing amazing things and making good income and working their asses off in order to get their blogs to where they need to be. So we're not trying to take anything away from them or, you know, shame on them for not doing X, Y, and Z. They've obviously found what works, I think, and good for them. But it's something that you and I struggle with. And, you know, maybe it's something that we continue to struggle with, or maybe we just abandon it altogether, which is what I'm pretty close to doing, honestly. So on that note, let's move forward a little bit and talk a little bit about cultural appropriation. And I know that this is something that we, the three of us, see a lot as birth and postpartum professionals, but it seems to be kind of an overarching issue in a lot of aspects of parenting. Things like using the word trendy to describe products or services, things like teepees or moccasins for little kids, rebozo wraps, baby wearing, vaginal steaming, yoni eggs, all of it. There seems to be a large spread use or adoption of practices without a lot of regard or even information for the origin or meaning behind their use. And do either of you have thoughts on that?
Of course. I think cultural appropriation, I think it's a buzzword, and a lot of people are talking about it. So something I did before coming on is I did some Googling of cultural appropriation and motherhood, and I don't know if that was a good idea or not, but the first few like blog posts or things that kind of popped up were people that were very angry, and they were saying like, I go throughout my life and, you know, if that was the case, then I'd be one big walking cultural appropriation phenomenon. So from the moment that I get out of bed, I'm doing this and I'm doing that. And, you know, this is of a different culture and that's of a different culture. So people just need to stop being butthurt about, you know, people borrowing their culture and just appreciate it. And there were several articles that just, as I was reading them, I was like, wow, like this person's really angry. And for me, when I think about cultural appropriation, it's not about saying you can't, participate or appreciate or use, but it's about respecting and acknowledging the culture in which that item or that idea or activity came from. And I think it goes back to what Alexis was saying as far as marketing, when we were talking about parenting books and blogs, that they're marketed for usually white middle class. So thinking about, baby wraps or, moccasins and, all of that marketing is geared towards white middle class families. And I think within that, it disregards the communities of color that have been practicing, let's say, for example, baby wearing since forever. And, to acknowledge, where this has come from. And I think it's great that it's evolved and that there are, baby wraps that you could pay $250 for, that may be more ergonomically correct or, puts less pressure or pain on your spine, but to still be able to acknowledge where it came from and understanding, the history behind that product, I think is really important.
Yeah. I was in South Africa in grad school, and this was before I even had kids and knew anything about baby wearing. And they just use a blanket. Like there's no $250 baby wrap. So, a woman there taught me how I was wearing a baby one day with this blanket, and she taught me how to wrap the baby. And then once I became a parent, just the industry of baby wearing is insane. And it's like, and even thinking about postpartum doula work, there's all this like fear of, you have to do things a safe way, like safe baby sleep and all that stuff, which is important. Yes, I'm not trying to minimize that, but I'm just saying that, again, it kind of moves away from, like, I was never going to talk about any of those things with the families that I worked with in South Africa, that would go against their culture and what they have been doing forever, like already before this industry even existed and before these standards were even put into place. It's a really interesting line.
I think, again, as someone with a South Asian background, I see this a lot with yoga and postpartum yoga and just this, I almost want to say, bastardization of yoga, of something that was once a very sacred practice and done with very trained individuals. And now it's been just watered down. And I think it's the watering down that pisses me off, because this is something my parents did, my grandparents did. I have an uncle in Round Rock that is very certified in yoga and teaches and taught yoga for years and years and years. But again, it's been so diluted and watered down that now we're including small baby animals in it. And it definitely doesn't have this same kind of impact or overreaching impact. And I think a lot of its original meaning and intent has been either glossed over or, like I said, it's just has not been passed on. And I know that there are some studios that do a beautiful job of really conveying the meaning behind each of the positions and each of the different stances and what they impact and what they affect. But unfortunately, that's not the case for all of them. I've taken yoga classes. I took prenatal yoga, and I did some gentle yoga just recently. And I think it was really important. What made me feel safe and what made my culture feel respected there is that the person teaching the class took a moment to explain why this move was so sacred or what the intent behind whatever practice was. If that's something that could be done more across the board, I think I wouldn't be so twitchy when I saw things about yoga or just, again, yoga with puppies or goats or whatever. It just seems like all of the intent is taken out of it, and it becomes just a way to make money and a bastardization of a rich cultural event or a rich culture, really.
Natita Gazelle, I feel like I've talked about her before.
You have? Yeah, I think you have.
Courtney knows her as well, right?
Yeah.
I took her trauma-conscious yoga training, and a lot of her work is around making sure that we understand where yoga came from, its history, its meaning, making sure that we know the Sanskrit terms for the poses and that we're saying them correctly. Like she's really big on all of that stuff. And one of the things that she talked about is how in America, like yoga is an entire like spiritual practice, and it has all these tenets that are a part of it that aren't talked about here in America, and that the only piece that is talked about is asana, which is the poses, and that we kind of adopted this one small piece of an entire spiritual practice and made it into an exercise program.
Exactly.
And that's not even what yoga is about. So she talked a lot about that in the training and how we need to have awareness of that and be mindful of that in our own practices, and especially if we're using this in our businesses, how we're incorporating that.
Yeah. And I wish that was more the norm to incorporate tenets and different aspects of it in a very respectful way. And I think from what you described, that sounds respectful to me. I don't think I would have an issue listening to her explain them, how things are pronounced, what they mean, what it's a bigger part of, and all of that. But like I said, I just get really twitchy sometimes when I see things on Facebook and people posting different things. And I'm like, you don't understand. People made so much fun of me in high school, middle school, elementary school, all that stuff, because what I was doing was so weird. But here they are now drinking their turmeric milk and, doing yoga 3 times a week or what have you. And it makes me mad because it's like, why is it so cool to do now? Why was it weird when I did it, But I guess those are my own issues.
No, I think that's the other part of cultural appropriation that we haven't discussed, is that we're appropriating a culture when there's a power imbalance and when we're profiting from a culture without any of that respect or knowledge or understanding. And so especially knowing, too, I think I included a quote in here specifically about yoga, but historically there were folks that they had to hide yoga and they were going to be persecuted for practicing it. And so just the fact that I'm sure there are many yoga studios in Austin that have no knowledge of that, and that they're able, as a white, skinny, blonde woman, that stereotypical image, they're not at risk of anything happening to them by using that practice, whereas like historically people's lives were put on the line for practicing a part of their culture, and now you're just going to use it and throw in goats, no problem. So I think that's the other piece, is like, is there a power imbalance? Is someone profiting from this culture that's not theirs?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point.
Something that I think about when I think about yoga, and I am not a yogi at all, or I think I've taken one yoga class my entire life. But when I think about yoga and kind of the experiences that I've had, is the accessibility of it. And where the classes are held and what parts of the city or parts of the community, and again, who are the classes marketed to. And I know there's a lady in Dallas, her name is Ebony Smith, and she has an organization called Yoga in the Hood. And I really like it because it's about bringing yoga practice and mindfulness into all communities. And, from my experiences with her, that it's majority communities of color. And, being able to, teach them the practice. And I know in the times that I've been with her, she's done a really great job of explaining what was going on and, the history, but then also just bringing that culture into different parts of the community that may not normally, they're not exposed.
Right. It's not accessible for them.
The practice.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Sure.
Natita is actually, she just started it's a yoga teacher training, but through a social justice lens.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
I think it's starting in January.
I guess as somebody who feels like their culture is exploited a lot, especially when it comes to pregnancy, postpartum, all of that health and wellness, it's nice for me to hear that there are people out there who are looking at it as more than just a way to make a quick buck and a way to market to, again, the stereotypical picture of who would take a yoga class and bringing it to people who may not necessarily get to hear about it otherwise, or looking at it through a social justice lens. And so that warms my cold black heart. And I'm glad to hear that.
We didn't mention around this the use of the word tribe.
Oh, yeah.
I wanted us to talk about that. Do y'all have any thoughts about that?
I mean,
the word tribe. You can go ahead, Naya.
Yes and no. I'm definitely seeing it come out more and more, and I'm seeing more and more people use it and places use it. And I understand their intention of creating a place that feels safe for motherhood or parenthood in general. But I just feel like, again, it's ignoring kind of the bigger picture. Tribe is typically used for Indigenous people, really. And the amount that they've been persecuted in this country is astonishing, and it makes my jaw drop. But for it to be kind of reappropriated to mean something sort of similar but completely different, without any acknowledgement. And that's kind of the thing that sort of sticks in me most. There's very little to no acknowledgement of where the origin of the word came from, how it was used, and things like that. So that's what tends to get me.
I'm right there with you that I know when to be transparent. So when I first had my son, I was a part of a mom's group, and I was just so happy to, be a part of a group of women that, understood what I was going through. And, they were moms that were, kind of in the same life stage. And, I noticed that find your tribe and, be a part of your tribe was kind of thrown around a lot. And I don't know if it was my postpartum brain or, what, but I didn't really begin to grasp the word and the meaning behind the word and the context it was being used in until, several months. And I was just like, wow, and for me, it was me, making a conscious decision to say, what is the word? In what context is it being used? And is that, the most appropriate? And is it honoring, culture, and other alternatives? Other different words that we could use to portray the same meaning or even something better. So I know for me, it was just kind of taking a second to realize and be conscious about the use of the word.
And I can honestly, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was going to say, I appreciate your honesty there, and thinking back to just what you said about how you were freshly postpartum and you were just excited to find a group of people who were going through that same stage of life with you. I'm fairly certain I must have done the same thing myself and referred to, my group of friends as my tribe without really putting a whole lot of thought into it. And I think that a lot of that goes back to the fact that we don't really have a lot of support for women postpartum. And so, not that our standards are low, but we're just so happy and excited that when we meet other people who are kind of experiencing the same hardships as us. But that's a tangent. That's got nothing to do with what we're talking about.
Well, full disclosure, I've been on my own, as a white woman, I've been on my own journey of unlearning and undoing things that I've done wrong. So throughout this whole conversation, I've been guilty of many things. But I think that's the key is acknowledging that and being open to doing something different, being open to listening and learning and unlearning what is ingrained in you. And so I just lost my train of thought. I had something really smart to say, too.
Well, I appreciated Courtney kind of taking a moment to say, well, that she thought about it. She tried to find, is there a different word that I could use? Is there something better? Because I know that once I sort of realized the path that I was going down, or really not the path I was going down, but more the implications of my words, I wanted to do better. And I think sometimes, like you said at the beginning of this, Alexis, is a lot of this is leaning into that uncomfortableness and trying to figure out what it is that you're doing that could possibly affect somebody else or impact somebody else, and how we can do better. And
You just reminded me what I was going to say.
oh, good. Say it. Say it before you forget again.
I was going to say, kind of back to that, I think, Courtney, you said this about how when you were Googling it, there were all these people that were so angry, like, you know, people are being too sensitive. Like when we have this conversation and we talk about these things, a common rebuttal is people are too sensitive. Why are people so sensitive? And so for me, again, I can't unlearn something if I'm not first willing to acknowledge, to step into that discomfort, be willing to do something different, and also recognize, like, people aren't being sensitive. They have very real pain.
Yeah.
There's very real pain behind what they're expressing and the story that they're trying to tell. And there's a very real pain in our history as a country that needs to be acknowledged. And of course, someone is sensitive about these things because of the pain and turmoil that they've been through.
Yeah, it's atrocious.
Yeah. So that was what I was going to say.
I think that's good.
Courtney. Okay. Well, let's move on to another question.
So my question was if there are any spaces where mothers or parents of color can share their experiences. And then I wanted to also talk a little bit about how social media, Instagram in particular, seems to be helping with visibility.
Yeah, I think Instagram is huge when it comes to people being able to kind of share their experiences. I know that there was a birth that I attended earlier this year, and it was a Black mom she was fighting to have a home birth. That's what she wanted. It was her second child, and you know she strongly desired a home birth, and I was so lucky, and I felt so gracious to be able to support her during that birth. And you know, that birth was also documented by a birth photographer. And, you know, for me, I was just doing what I do and what comes natural to me and loving on that mom. And she was doing what came natural to her and birthing her baby and just being an overall badass. And we were both lucky to get that caught on film and to watch that picture go viral and to watch people's reaction to a Black woman birthing her child on her own terms in her home and being supported, you know, by a Black doula and a Black student midwife and a photographer of color. Like, it was amazing. And, you know, watching that picture just kind of pop up everywhere and do all the things, it made me proud, not only to have been a part of that mom's experience, but to watch people share it and for it to be normalized. And when I talk to that mom, or when I talk to her often, because of course I want to follow up and, you know, find out how the baby's doing, and the number of people that send her messages about, like, how did you do it? Like, you know, I want to have my baby in my home. Like, what are the steps that I need to take? And, you know, normalizing and making it be something. We don't see that often. We don't see a lot of pictures of people of color feeling empowered and being able to, you know, give birth on their own terms. So for me, it's been amazing. It's been an amazing experience watching that. And, you know, the photographer, Stephanie, just continued to capture births, both, you know, of people of color and white families giving birth, and just how, you know, her timeline just has blown up with just bringing awareness to different types of birth, with different people and different types of families. It's just the accessibility. I think it's great. I'm rambling.
No, you're great. We're going to make sure we include a link to that image in our show notes. It is stunning.
Yeah, as soon as you started talking about that, I knew exactly which one it was.
Naya and I were making eyes at each other, and we're like, oh, that birth is beautiful. It was so beautiful.
She was a woman in her power, and that is absolutely something you don't see very often.
That one image is so raw of her, like, screaming her baby out. It's amazing. Well, in the interest of time, I think our final question should maybe be the listener question we got. So we asked our Instagram followers if we told them we were recording tonight and the different topics we were going to be discussing, and invited them to send questions. And we had one listener send in a question. So she wrote, any tips for spotting and working with acculturation, racism, sexism in kids' television shows and games? I thought that was a very good question.
That is a very good question.
Any thoughts, ladies?
So I had a thought. So I do have a thought. I think it is about having conversations and really just being able to talk to your child about what they see and what they think about it. And starting there, my son's only 2, so we don't necessarily have many conversations, about what he watches or what he hears or what he sees. But I think, as he gets older and continues to engage more in media, being able to kind of question, like, what did you think about that? Do you think that made, could that have hurt someone's feelings? Do you think we talk a lot about choices? Like, do you think that was a good choice? And just being able to facilitate a conversation with your child, I think, is the first step.
That was basically going to be my answer too, is just to have a conversation about it and say, let's talk about what we just saw. What did you think of that? How did it make you feel? What would you have done differently? Or would you have made that same choice or comment or decision if you were in that situation, and kind of going with it from there? My kids are a little bit older. They're about to be 5 and 9 this year. And so with my 9-year-old, I can definitely have those conversations. With my 5-year-old, it's like hit and miss, but, we're really not beyond the Paw Patrol realm of television with him right now anyway. But with the oldest, we're definitely having those discussions and talking about why so-and-so should not have said that and how it could have been hurtful to somebody else.
It's really interesting. Television shows or movies that I watched as a child, rewatching them with my children.
Gosh, Looney Tunes, Pepe Le Pew?
It's appalling.
It is horrible.
We recently watched Dennis the Menace.
Oh.
So many terrible scenes. But I think to your point, Courtney, like there was one scene, there's a little girl, and they have like a tree house. And so the little girl has like the baby doll. And when they get to the tree house, like she decorates it and she's making it all pretty and pink. And like the boys are, they're too good to do that. Like she has to decorate the tree house and she has to take care of the baby. And so in the moment, I was like, this is absurd. Like I was saying this out loud. And then, I kind of took a few steps back and was like, guys, can only girls decorate tree houses? Right. Can only girls play with baby dolls? Like, that's how I had that conversation with my kids. And of course, we came to the conclusion that no, that's not true. But really small things like that I think are easily missed, especially if you're not fully watching whatever is on with your child. Because I easily could have missed that, and then that message is received without that conversation. So maybe another part is we need to be paying attention
to what they're watching. Yeah, absolutely. And playing with.
Because it made me think, as you guys were talking about that, I haven't gone back and watched any cartoons from my childhood in a long time because I know I'd probably be disturbed. But it made me think about, just reflecting on, I can remember so many, cartoons or examples of times where, a cartoon or, a character would put on like Native American, headdresses or garbs and,
Peter Pan,
run around and, making, what'd you say?
Peter Pan.
Exactly. Yes. And like, as children, we see that and we're like, okay, like this must be the norm and this must be, what happens. And, we mimic that, but being able to have a conversation, with our children about like the history and, could it be hurtful, if someone did that and, how could that make someone feel? Important, like facilitating those conversations with anything, but especially what our children are seeing in the media is huge.
Yeah.
So on that note, on days that I'm not working and I'm unpacking or whatever, I find myself just watching Friends reruns. That show has not aged well. Just, I'm watching some of these and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that this was broadcast at 8 p.m. on Thursday nights and like a nationally ranked show. And not all of them, but I mean, Sex and the City is the same way. And I adore that show. But there's a lot of transphobic comments that are made on Sex and the City. And I did not realize it until I follow an Instagram account that's, I think it's called Woke Charlotte. And it's really interesting. But anyway.
Sorry, guys. I thought I was going to make it through this whole episode without coughing, and then I just coughed. Well, I think we're out of time.
Yeah.
But we appreciate you coming on, Courtney.
Thanks for having me.
We will make sure to link some of the things we talked about in our show notes and also tell people where they can find you.
You can find me lots of different places, Facebook and Instagram at Courtney Butts Doula. And my website is CourtneyButts.com or DallasBirthDoulas.com.
Awesome.
Thank you for coming on again.
Thanks for having me. It was so great.
If the Top Knot Squad's content makes you laugh, nod in agreement, or makes you feel less alone, we'd love your support in the cost of producing this podcast. Visit patreon.com/TopKnotSquad to learn more about our budget-friendly sponsorship tiers and how you can help ensure that TKS has a future. Every little bit helps.
If you like what you hear, then be sure to click the subscribe button in your podcast app. While you're there, leave us a review. You can find us on social media. Just search for Top Knot Squad. We welcome your feedback and love making new friends.